All right, thank you, Dr. Adams. Again, my name is Eric DeBoer. I was hired with the AgCenter, and I started on July 1st. And I just kind of wanted to start out introducing myself so you all could get to know me a little bit better. I'm originally from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I attended Michigan State University and got a bachelor's in turf management in 2010. And then after receiving that degree, I went into the field, worked in the landscape industry as well as on golf courses. So I do have some of the practical knowledge of actually being out in the field and doing the work as well. And then I decided to pursue further education and found an assistantship at the University of Arkansas, where I did my master's and my doctorate there with Dr. Mike Richardson. And I defended my dissertation actually just earlier this year in May. And so moved down in late June, and so this is, I'm really still kind of brand new to Louisiana and trying to learn all the different weeds and grasses growing here. So just bear with me, and we can, if you have questions or you contact your county or your parish extension agent and they can't get the answer and they can come to me and I can't get the answer, we'll figure out how to get the answer for you. So today, as the title showed, we're going to be talking about weed control in the landscape. And so, I guess looking for a little audience participation, can anyone give me just a good definition of what a weed is? How do we know what a weed is? Okay, very good, yeah. I would expect a lot of you to know that, so that's good. I just defined it as any plant growing where it's not wanted could be considered a weed. And then when we're talking about weed control, first and foremost, you want a dense, healthy stand of turf. That's going to be your number one defense against weeds. And then if we do, have a weed outbreak, the number one way to control them is through proper identification. And so we're going to be doing a little refresher today on kind of plant morphology, and then also touching on some difficult weeds to control in the landscape. So one way that we can classify weeds to better identify them is just kind of how they look morphologically. So you can have grassy weeds, which are monocots, meaning they'll have one cotyledon, and then they also have hollow stems. There's sedges, which have triangular stems, and their leaves are arranged in threes. And then we also have broadleaf weeds, and those broadleaves they will have two cotyledons, are called a dicot, and then they're separated typically by having showy flowers, and that's how they're separated from grasses and sedges. And then there's also plants that don't fit into any of those categories, like wild garlic or pathrush. And then another way that we can classify weeds different from their morphological characteristics is the time of year that they grow. So summer annual weeds, those are going to germinate in the spring. They're going to live all through the summer, complete their life cycle, set seed, die off, and do it again next year. And the winter annuals are going to be they're on a different timeline. So they're getting ready right now to start germinating. They're going to live their life cycle through the winter. They like the cooler weather. They sense it's starting to get hot. They'll set seed, die off, and do it again the next year. And then we have the horrible weeds that are the most difficult to control, and those are the perennials. And that's typically, they're more difficult just because pre-emergence herbicides, they're not going to be as effective on these, especially on existing communities. And then also there are biennial weeds, such as wild carrot or, the name's escaping me now, thistle, Canada thistle. Those are biennials. So the first year they're just going to grow vegetatively, and then in year two they'll set seed, die off, and repeat that cycle. So those are some kind of ways that we can differentiate weeds and decide, what chemistries and herbicides we want to use to control them. So this is something that this statement here I think really rings true in that weeds aren't causing weed turf. They're the result of weed turf. And so anything that we can do to encourage healthy growth of our grass is going to be first and foremost what we're going to be doing before deciding to use a herbicide. And that involves, so I guess how that works is what's causing weed turf, improper turf selection. If you're trying to grow Bermuda grass underneath a tree, Bermuda grass loves sun. It's going to be very thin, leaving a very wide open canopy for weed germination. So maybe opting to choose a grass like St. Augustine, which is going to be much more shade tolerant. Environmental stressors, like this year, there's some things you just can't do anything about. This is not new to me, or this is kind of my normal here in Louisiana because I don't know any different, but apparently it's been very, very dry this summer. You're missing a lot of the normal rains that you get. Some of the stuff you can't do anything about. If you have the ability to irrigate, great. But heat, drought, those can cause weed turf. So just choosing the best plants that are able to tolerate the environment. Physical damage from mowing. Mowing in the same patterns and constantly turning in the same area. Mower tires ripping up spots, leading to thinned out turf. And then just improper cultural practices. Overwatering, using your irrigation system too much will lead to water-loving weeds germinating, and the opposite. If you don't irrigate at all, you're going to get the weeds that love the dry, compacted soil. So mowing too low is another one. Typically, we say the range of mowing heights for a grass. Choosing to just mow at the highest end of that mowing height is going to always be the best. It may seem cooler to try and mow it low and make it look cool, but ultimately for the health of the plant, it's better to go with the higher height of cut, excuse me. And so some cultural practices that we can incorporate to try to reduce weed numbers before resorting to herbicides. One would be regular core aerification or a really deep verticutting. And so what that can do, that's gonna prohibit weeds that love compacted soils. Something like goosegrass, spurge, weeds like that grow really well in compacted soils. Getting the core aerification on that ground can help alleviate some of the compaction and help your turf be a little more competitive against those weeds. Improving drainage problems. I didn't realize how big of an issue that can be until I moved here. Just some of the irrigation I've seen, they really love to lay the water out there and are almost creating some of their own problems in areas I'm seeing where it's just clearly being overwatered. It's a very dry summer. And I'm seeing just standing water in a landscape that's just been watered, and there's sedges and all other sorts of weeds. So improving your drainage can really help against the water-loving weeds. And as I mentioned earlier, increasing sunshine, trimming limbs on trees can help the grass. And then again, the proper water, fertilizing, not over fertilizing, just giving the grass what it needs when it needs it. And so here's kind of, as I mentioned, the compacted weed, or the compacted soil weeds, and then the water-loving weeds. These can kind of be, has anyone heard the term indicator weeds? You see a weed growing, it might be an indication that something's wrong. Here's kind of just a list of some weeds that are around here and some aren't, but something like dollar weed is going to be indicative of excessive soil moisture. And then if you start seeing things like goosegrass, you're thinking droughty, compacted soils. And then when you start seeing things like clover or the common lespedeza, plants like that, that's going to be low fertility. So you're thinking low nitrogen might be time to fertilize. So yeah, so if you're seeing certain indicator weeds, it's not a coincidence that they're growing where they're growing. Okay, and so in order to also help identify specific weeds, so we've differentiated between grasses and broadleaves, but what about grassy weeds that look alike? You need the proper identification in order to choose the proper herbicide to kill the weed. So here's kind of just a refresher on grass parts, morphological features of grasses, auricles, legules, veination can be a good way to differentiate between weeds. We'll look a little bit closer at these. So collars on grass, that's going to be on the back side of the blade, and they can be broad, narrow, or divided. You can have the leaf sheath, kind of how the leaf wraps around the stem. That can be indicative, and they're all different between different grasses. The ligule it's sort of a appendage that sticks up between the leaf and the stem. And it can either be membranous, so it's just a little piece of tissue. It can be a fringe of hairs, or it can be absent and not there at all. And then the auricle, which kind of wraps around, it's kind of how the leaf wraps around the stem. Something like, if anyone's familiar with annual ryegrass, here it's known for its really big clasping auricles. And then they can also be rudimentary or completely absent. And then when you're talking about your broadleaf weeds, leaf shape is a great way to help describe the weed in question and make sure you're actually trying to control what you think you're controlling. Leaf attachment is also another great way, whether the leaves have petioles or whether they're just connected right to the stem. And then also the leaf arrangement. That can be good for broadleaves and grasses. A way to differentiate centipede grass and St. Augustine grass. St. Augustine grass is going to have its leaves are opposite on the stem, and centipede grass, St. Augustine is opposite, and centipede grass, the leaves are alternate. So that's just one way that you can start differentiating plants. And so now I think it's time we move into some of the nasty weeds here. And I titled it Taming the Weeds because sometimes we're just not going to be able to completely get a kill of all the weeds without a complete renovation. Torpedo grass could be one of those weeds. It's a warm season perennial, and it does have rhizomes and stolons, but primarily is spreading through aggressive rhizomes. And then another sort of indicator thing, wet soils. That's not to say it's not going to live in a dry soil, but if your soil's wet, you're just giving it that much more opportunity against the grass that you actually want growing there. And it also just grows very aggressively. Those all combine to make it very difficult to control. Identification of torpedo grass, it has a waxy silver green leaf, and the stems and the leaves are both erect. Well, there's also a hairy ligule, so we mentioned that little appendage that sticks up between the stem and the leaf blade. That's one way to know that you're dealing with torpedo grass. How to control it. Does anyone have trouble controlling torpedo grass? Okay.
I can answer that. One thing is always never say that you can even eradicate it during renovation. Because it's just not something you can eradicate. It roots between 24 and 36 inches deep. It's got a knot halfway down the rooting system. So Roundup laughs at it because Roundup is a translocator that goes in through the foliage down to the stem and kills the root. It can't penetrate through the knot, very similar to a knot grass. So there are ways to control it. If you want me to get into those, there's Sedoxyphin, which you could use in a garden. If you are a grounds applicator, you can use products like Drive, which is a golf course chemical. So that's just what I can think.
Yeah, that's sounds about like what I've heard too and researched. So like Lisa mentioned, Drive, the active ingredient will be quinclorac. That's safe on zoysia and Bermuda. Now that's not to say you're gonna go out with one application of Drive and eradicate torpedo grass. You can maybe ding it and hopefully help your wanted grass compete with it. St. Augustine, you don't have any selective options for controlling it. It's just complete renovation, and even then, you might not even get rid of it. And then also, as she mentioned, cefoxidin too, and that's specifically for use in centipede grass.
No, in the garden.
Oh, in the garden. Well, okay. And then, but it is labeled for centipede too, I believe.
Yeah, but you get a lot, you have to do it when it's dormant, and
Okay.
when it's dormant, what, you'll get phototrophic burn, but the problem is that also torpedo goes into a dormancy along with it. So that's why you can't get a good kill on something
Okay.
like that. If you're gonna renovate, and if, for everyone to know this, don't sell your customer a bill of goods. Don't tell them, if you have St. Augustine and you have torpedo, I can just cut it all up and I can give you a new one that's gone. That's not the case, okay? And what happens is it's one of those things. It's professionalism. You gotta make sure your client knows exactly what's gonna happen. So you let them know, we can take out your St. Augustine, I can kill with some golf course chemicals. And this is if you're licensed to do so, because you have to be licensed and grounds applicated to be able to use these type of chemicals, okay? And you kill it, and you kill it, and you kill it. It's about a 2-month-long process. Then the only thing you can do is go back with something like a Bermuda or a zoysia. That you can periodically treat with a golf course chemical. You cannot do that with St. Augustine, you cannot do that with centipede. So in order to keep the gardens clean, it's a constant during the growing season. You go back with Fusilade and Sedoxyphin, Fusilade, Sedoxyphin, Fusilade, Sedoxyphin. Gives you about a month and a half of free. But after you do this for a couple of years on a property, you can actually get it to the point where you don't have it coming up 24/7.
Yeah, and that's another strategy too, of just spraying Roundup and then waiting a week and see what comes up. Just deplete the seed bed in the soil, spray whatever comes up with Roundup, if you have that kind of time. But yeah, so again, it just goes back to some things for your customers. They may not want to hear this stuff, but it's just the truth. And so some weeds are just extremely difficult to eradicate. And then spot treating with glyphosate, if you have a real small plant, if you catch it early, maybe that will be efficacious, but still, that's remains to be seen. Another one, not sure really how good this shows up, that's clumps of Dallas grass. That's another good one. That's one that we had up in Arkansas too, that was really bad. It's a warm season, perennial again, as we mentioned, the perennials are gonna be the toughest ones. That's an indicator of dry, compacted soils. And then it's a clump forming, but it does spread by rhizomes, and then it also does produce seed. So now it's spreading by seed and rhizomes. It can be tough to control. How you're gonna identify it, has very coarse leaves, and then it has the flowers, which are on the flower stem, they're arranged alternately. And so this can kind of be mixed up with a grass I'm gonna be mentioning shortly, but one way that you can make sure that you're actually treating Dallas grass is if you can find a seed head and see how the spikes are arranged and they're alternate. And so if you can, get out with pre-emergence, hopefully you can stop any seed that was put out and was planning to emerge, but it's not gonna do anything to the existing Dallas grass that you have. As we mentioned earlier with the Latin names, and just kind of going with the pronunciation, some of these active ingredients have interesting pronunciations too, but thion carbazone plus sporium sulfuron and halosulfuron You can spot treat with that in Bermuda zoysia. St. Augustine and centipede, again, you're pretty much reliant on spot treating with glyphosate. And then something that can be mixed up with Dallas grass is Bahia grass. They're both in the Pespalum genus, and the big difference is the peace sign. Everyone know the Bahia grass seed head's giving you the peace sign, and the Dallas grass is going to be alternately attached. Whoops. Okay. So again, another warm season perennial, another indicator of dry compacted soils. This Bahia grass really loves to produce seed, and that's its main advantage. It's just constantly producing seed and reseeding itself, but it also does spread through rhizomes. And the rhizomes actually can become woody too, and so it's very drought tolerant, and that's another big advantage that it has over some of the more desirable grasses. It has, again, coarse leaves, but the flowers form that distinct V. And then sometimes the rhizomes will kind of take on a reddish or pinkish hue. Post-emergence, if you can get it in late spring, as soon as it's coming out of dormancy, or going into the summer, metsulfuron methyl, as I understand, is particularly effective against Pensacola Bahia grass, which is what is going to be the majority of the Bahia grass infesting lawns in this area. And then also sethoxidin, and then again, glyphosate spot treatments. Has anyone seen Virginia buttonweed here? Have trouble controlling that? Yeah, so that was one that was kind of new to me, not as prevalent where I was, but I'm going to be doing as much learning about Virginia buttonweed as I can. Another perennial, and this one is particularly difficult because it can reproduce by seed, but also from stem fragments. And if you think about why that's advantageous for it, if you're going around mowing the lawn and you're chopping it up, you're just spreading more and more Virginia buttonweed stem fragments that can establish and turn into whole other plants. And yeah, it's a low grower, so it tolerates the mowing. And then the seed that it does produce will persist in the soil for a long time. And this all adds up for it to just be an absolute nightmare. Identifying, I don't know if anyone in here needs a refresher on identifying it, but linear to oval shaped leaves, you're looking for the white flowers with 4 petals, and then it kind of has little circular fruits that are the buttons, on there. And then yeah, it forms very dense mats. And then pre-emergence herbicides are not very effective on buttonweed, tolerant to a lot of post-emergent herbicides. One thing in the research I saw 2,4-D, dicamba, mecocrop, and carfentrazone. I believe that product's called Speed Zone South. That it's labeled for it. I'm not saying it's gonna kill it completely, but always with weeds like these difficult ones that we're talking about, repeat applications are gonna be very helpful. And then also metsulfuron, and then I believe this bottom combination is Celsius, for those of you, yeah. So Celsius, I know you can use it on all the warm season grasses down here, so I'm sure people are probably pretty reliant on that, and hopefully it continues to work well. Doveweed is another one that I got familiar with at where I live. They really love to lay the water to the grass, and it's kind of in a shaded area, and it's just completely infested with doveweed. This one, hey, it's a warm season annual now. We've had our first annual weed that's difficult. We talked about the dry compacted soil indicators. Doveweed's an indicator of time to lay back on the water, potentially. It's an indicator of poor drainage, and then their seeds germinate in the late spring, but they can also grow through their stolons. So how you're gonna identify it, thick grass-like leaves. They are arranged alternately on the stem, so as we mentioned earlier, you see an alternate arrangement, it's a good idea that it's doveweed. And then their stolons can form a really dense mat, and they're also kind of bare, and I didn't realize this, it's also called naked stem dew flower. So that's kind of, you just get a bare stem way at the bottom. And then the flowers can turn blue to purple. The ones I got a photo of hadn't gotten to that point yet. Pre-emergence herbicides, from what I understand, they can be effective just because it does regrow from seed yearly. Post-emergence, Forum sulfuron, that's just for Bermuda and zoysia grass. And then again, Celsius, kind of as a catch-all. If you can spray Celsius on it, try it, it's a good product. And then again with the repeat applications, and maybe even sooner than 4 to 6 weeks. I've seen other, crabgrass control reapplications called for as soon as a week after the first one. But always follow the label. And then Lespedeza, I mentioned it a little bit earlier. What could Lespedeza be an indicator for if you're seeing it popping up in your landscape?
Compacted soil.
Compacted, low fertility soils. And this again, I'll mention it here, but it's a warm season, it's a legume, so it can fix nitrogen. So it doesn't need all the fertilizer, it's happy to just live in very infertile soils, dry, low fertility. And the issue with it is that their stems can become woody. And so it's just hard to get a good coverage with a herbicide on there. You're gonna look for the oval shaped leaves. It's a trifoliate like most of the legumes. We mentioned leaves earlier with petioles. The Lespedeza, each leaf is connected to the stem with a petiole. And then the veins, you can really see the prominent veination on the leaves. That's a telltale sign. And then also the kind of purplish, pinkish flower. These are all just what's suggested. I'm not saying that you're gonna get complete control of Lespedeza either. And yeah, feel free to tell all of your clients this too, and the people that it's just, I know they want to know what's going to kill it and kill it right away. And sometimes it's just not that easy. Atrazine does have some pre-emergence activity that can be used. From what I understand, atrazine has kind of lost efficacy on a lot of stuff down here. And then post-emergence herbicides, if you're going to apply them quickly. You want to apply it to as young of a plant as possible, and that goes for all the weeds you're going to control post-emergent. As soon as you can do it, the sooner the better. And then the last one we'll talk about is purple nutsedge. Different from yellow nutsedge. So if you use your imagination, this kind of looks like a purple flower. And then also a rounded leaf tip, which also that doesn't look very rounded, but when you compare it to a yellow nutsedge leaf, it's much more dull and rounded looking. And that's one way to tell the difference. Also, they're just gonna be smaller plants than yellow nutsedge. And then you probably all are aware of the triangular stem of sedges in general. That won't help you differentiate between the two, but it helps you know that you're working with a sedge. And then here's why they're so hard to kill. A very waxy leaf, and then also underground tubers that are just happy to regrow after you burn off any of the shoot up above.
There's a nice little stand that is growing outside. If you go out the door to the right.
To the right.
By the speed limit.
Okay, yeah, go check out some nutsedge out there. There are some more control options for sedges. I know Sedgehammer, that's worked for me quite well. But all of these active ingredients, if applied properly and given a proper amount of time and multiple applications, should be able to get decent control of sedges. Turn the water off too, that will help.
Did you say sledgehammer?
Yes, sledgehammer.
That's sledging.
No.
Nope.
Well, you can use that too.
You could, yeah, you probably might feel like doing that. But yeah, so just to kind of wrap things up here with a
There's one you
review.
really didn't mention that I know a lot of people who have trouble with is, how do you say it,
Kalinga. That's another kind of
Yeah.
sedge-like weed.
It's a pain in the butt.
Yep. And that's another water lover.
Yeah.
But typically, I don't know if this is like a catch-all, but if it's labeled for sedges, it may have activity on Kalinga. Just check the label.
Sedgehammer doesn't as much as certainty. Certainty's
Okay.
better with, yeah, if you do a little research, you'll find out there's some of them that are better for the nut sedge and then for the Kalinga, or how do you say it? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, green. Yeah, there's different kinds. There's false green Kalinga, green Kalinga. Yeah, water lovers and waxy leaves, so they're tough to kill. And then to just kind of wrap it up with a little review, weeds are caused, the weed infestations are caused by weak turf. They do not cause the weak turf. And they could be indicators of problems that are more than just the weeds themselves. And if you're gonna control it, make sure you're IDing it properly. If it's hard enough to control them, at least try to be controlling the right weed. And then always, you may need more than one application. Don't go out with one spray and expect a complete kill on any of these weeds. And then something that can help you, always use a surfactant or the methylated seed oil if it's called for. The label says apply with a surfactant. It's for a reason, it helps with the efficacy, so don't skimp out on that. And yeah, so I'm the new turf management professor here with the AgCenter, and I look forward to working with you guys all in the future. Thank you.
Yay! I have some questions. Look, you got questions?
Yes.
You're not finished.
Surfactant, is that like, dishwashing detergent?
More or less.
See that?
Soap, yeah, dish soap
Now,
can be used.
Second question, what if it's growing, I have a gravel pad in my house, it pops up, so it's not like it's holding water, and so I'm wondering, what,
Some of the water-loving weeds are popping up.
you name it, they pop up.
Okay.
Even though I spray it, ground up, it'll come back, something will come back up. Yesterday I was just going.
Yeah, depending on the specific weeds, it may not hurt to just 2 or 3 times a year apply a pre-emergent herbicide to it.
One more, another question. How about, is there any kind of, I know there's software like PlantNet that helps with plants and flowers. Is there any software or app that you recommend for identifying, because I know identification is a very important part of this.
Yeah, so,
Lots of good ones. There's a bunch of them. Looking and searching. There's 3 ones and the expensive ones you pay for.
Just for
PlantNet, there's one out there that's called PlantNet.
Right,
It's free.
right.
It's about 90% accurate. They're not all perfect, but they get you
Yeah.
close, right?
so again, and I forgot to mention that specifically with grassy weeds and grasses themselves, that's where I see them get mixed up a lot. And that's where, if you know the ligule and you know the oracle, and you can say, wait a minute, this has a membranous ligule, but it told me it was this grass, and oh, that's not right. But Picture This is the name of an app. That's the one I bought. I've had great success with that one. But yeah, just look up identifying apps, and they all really for broadleaf weeds, and they're very accurate. But yeah, it's called Picture This. I think you gotta pay for that one, but
One last one.
oh, there it is.
Torch, just
$3 a year.
propane torch,
Yeah.
is that,
So, I've seen people experimenting with it. I've never done anything with that myself. If you have the stomach to handle a burnt circle in your lawn, I think
burn ban going on in your state right now.
and yeah, thank you. Not right now with the burn ban, please.
thing is with a torch, it's not gonna kill the root.
Right.
Okay, so most of your
Quick burn.
perennials or broadleaves, they're gonna come right back.
Okay. Yep.
The way I've seen the torch used in gravel areas or driveways is to kill it off with glyphosate first, and then come back with the torch and burn off the dead portion.
Okay.
So you mentioned a couple of products that, like selected, it seemed like Zoysia and Bermuda was getting ripped up, and St. Augustine and Centipede were kind of getting ripped up. Could you describe a little bit about why those selections?
So physiologically, no, I can't explain it. Bermuda grass and zoysia are just historically very tolerant of the same herbicide, to the point where it was very, very difficult to selectively remove Bermuda grass from zoysia grass. But now there is a product for that. And if anyone's interested in that, I believe it's called Recognition from Syngenta. And I've seen that just absolutely fry Bermuda and zoysia grass. So that was kind of a game changer. But Centipede is just weird. Pretty much you have cefoxidem and not much else. They're just more finicky. Bermuda and zoysia are just hardier grasses. That's really the only way I can explain it.
Both St. Augustine and
And
Centipede.
Centipede. And they'll even be different too, but normally if it's safe for one, it's safe for the other. But Centipede is the one that really gets weird with herbicides. Limits your product.
It's just very easy to kill.
Yeah, it's just sensitive, yep.